Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to the 13th Grand Prix of 2025 and the return to one of the best racetracks in the world, Spa Francorchamps. And yeah, great to be back at this brilliant racetrack, and hopefully another great race weekend is on our hands, like what we had at the last Grand Prix at Silverstone. And we've had, 3 weeks since the last Grand Prix. It feels like we've had basically a summer break since the last Grand Prix, but we still have a summer break to come, which starts in just over a week from now. So, yeah, it's been sparse on the Formula One front in the last 3 weeks. Not necessarily in terms of news, but obviously in terms of racing. But yeah, good to be back for the Formula One season. And of course, this weekend and next weekend are the final 2 races before the summer break, which is 4 weeks long. And then we return at Zandvoort at the very end of August. Yeah, should be a decent weekend. Spa has not produced, I'll be honest, that many great races in the last few years. There is quite a possible chance of rain for tomorrow's race, so that could really help things and spice things up, like of course it did at Silverstone, but we'll have to see how it goes. But so far, it's been a dry and warm weekend at Spa. So yeah, we will see whether the rain truly does happen tomorrow. But yeah, should be still a decent weekend in terms of entertainment and excitement. But there is one team that is clearly looking to be clearly ahead of the rest this weekend. And even though they didn't win the sprint race, which took place, what was it, a couple hours ago, I think the sprint race finished. Even though they didn't win the sprint, McLaren are looking very, very good for the overall Grand Prix victory for this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix. So yeah, McLaren looking great. But yeah, obviously in this build-up to qualifying, which gets underway in about an hour and 25 minutes from now, we'll do the usual, go through what's happened so far this weekend. I'll look at the sprint qualifying results to see what the pace has been like so far this weekend. We'll get into obviously the sector time data to understand why certain teams are so far off the pace and why certain teams are so quick, such as McLaren. And then, of course, we'll go through all that data, and then obviously I'll get into my predictions for qualifying, and we'll go through some stats before the qualifying session that you guys need to remember regarding the top teams and top drivers going into this qualifying session. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing in this build-up. I will also do a quick channel update at some point because of course we are only 10 days or so, or 9 days I think it is, until the summer break. So I will do a quick channel update as to what the summer break content is going to be and when that's going to be coming out, because I'm pretty much not done with my summer break content. I've got one of the videos complete and scheduled for upload, but yeah, the other 2 videos I've got planned are not quite finished yet. But I'll get more so into that in this build-up in a few minutes' time. But yeah, that's the plan for this build-up. And then, of course, once qualifying gets underway, we'll be taking you through the session. Hope you guys are well. Hope you've had a good last 3 weeks or so. No matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, hopefully you've had great weather, and hopefully just in general life has been good, or at least better than it's been at other times this year. Hope you're all doing as well as possible, given whatever circumstances you may be going through. And I hope you can join me today in enjoying and watching along qualifying at Spa. A qualifying session that should be a decent one. It's not going to be as exciting, I don't think, as what we saw at Silverstone 3 weeks ago, but it's still going to be a decent one. And especially given that Spa is one of those circuits where the drivers really show their quality. It is a driver's circuit, no doubt about that. So yeah, can't wait to see what happens in this qualifying session coming up in an hour and 24 minutes time. Now, I won't show on screen what the championship standings are coming out of the sprint race, but I will quickly go through what the results of the sprint were for the top 8. Of course, the top 8 are the only positions that score points in the sprint. Max Verstappen won the sprint mainly because of having an amazingly quick car in a straight line, which he utilised at the very start. So yeah, he won the sprint. Oscar Piastri second, Lando Norris third, and then it was Leclerc fourth, Ocon 5th, Sainz 6th, Behrman 7th, and Isaac Hadjar in 8th place. Some vital points there, by the way, for Haas after the last Grand Prix at Silverstone, where they had a lot of potential but ended up crashing with each other. So yeah, great sprint for Haas, a good one for Williams as well to get some points, and Hadjar as well getting a point for Racing Bulls. The only other thing to mention is, Oscar Piastri is now 1 point further clear in the Drivers' Championship than he was coming into the weekend. So it's now 9 points, the gap between Piastri and Norris. So if Lando is to take the lead of the championship this weekend, he needs Oscar Piastri to finish third or lower, and Lando needs to pretty much win the Grand Prix this weekend. But looking at the pace and the running so far at Spa, looks like Piastri is the main man, really, for McLaren, and the favourite, really, for the weekend, given just how incredibly quick he has looked in that McLaren. And talking of which, let's go through the results of sprint qualifying, which took place yesterday, and look at that gap. Pretty much half a second between Piastri and Max in the Red Bull. And that is an incredible difference between the McLaren and the Red Bull. Remember, Max, he is the fastest driver in Formula One, the best driver in Formula One. So, when you consider that, and you consider just how far ahead Piastri was in sprint qualifying, it really does show just how incredibly dominant the McLaren is over the rest of the field. It is by far the best car this weekend. It's not even close. The only reason in the sprint Max was able to win was because he drove the socks off the car and was able to get repeatedly great exits from turn 1 that would just about keep him ahead, at Les Combes at the end of the Kemmel Straight. So, yeah, Verstappen has to basically drive at that level to even have a chance of getting near the McLarens. But yeah, McLaren are so far ahead of the rest of the field. It's not even funny. And that's in the dry. If it was wet, it would probably be double in terms of the gap between them and the rest. We saw that at Silverstone. They were, like a second a lap quicker than Ferrari, Red Bull. It was, it was incredible, their pace in the wet. And if it does rain tomorrow, it's not going to rain today, but if it does rain tomorrow, then McLaren, even if they're not on pole by some miracle, they are going to win by an absolute country mile, because that car is just so far ahead of everything else. Verstappen did a great job to end up in second. Lando Norris has got to do a better job in third. And I know you will say, oh, well, this is only sprint qualifying. But if you go look at practice 1, he was also, in practice 1, I think half a second away from Oscar. That is nowhere near good enough. Especially when you consider, even though this is a good track for Oscar, it always has been. Last year, Lando did actually out-qualify Piastri around this track. So it's not like Oscar has always, destroyed Lando here at Spa. There's no reason for Lando to be that far off the pace. That is really poor from Lando. And he should be, really today, making it, if he's going to be the slower McLaren, which is very likely, he has to be making it at least a McLaren 1-2. There's no reason McLaren should be first and third or first and fourth on the grid. They have to be locking out the front row, especially with the pace advantage that they do have. So, yeah, McLaren easily the quickest team. Max in second because the Red Bull is decent around this track, especially with the downforce level they've gone with. They've trimmed the wings out quite a bit. But also Max Verstappen is, again, the best driver on the grid and is amazing around this track. So that's the only reason he's right in there. Fourth, Charles Leclerc. Leclerc lucky, really, to be fourth because Mercedes, I didn't watch sprint qualifying, but Mercedes, for some reason, ended up not getting through to the top 10. And Lewis Hamilton, his teammate, had a spin at the end of the first part of sprint qualifying because I think of a downshift problem with his gearbox. So yeah, Leclerc lucky to be fourth on the grid. Ferrari have been so diabolically shit this weekend. It's not even funny. This new suspension upgrade, which has been fitted now to the car, which we were all hyping up for weeks, has done nothing. And in fact, it seemingly has made the car worse compared to what it was like at Silverstone. This car was nowhere near this bad at Silverstone. And just watching the car on board at times from the sprint race, it really is a pig of a car. It is awful, that Ferrari car. Yeah, they are nowhere near in the action this weekend. They will be incredibly lucky if they were to end up on the podium tomorrow. Incredibly lucky, because the pace is not there whatsoever. They are closer to the midfield than they are to the front of the field. And that is unacceptable if you are Ferrari. So yeah, Leclerc, like I said, lucky to be fourth, really, from sprint qualifying, because the car definitely not really quick enough for that position. And if you go look at the results from practice one, which I think at times is a bit more representative of the actual pace than what sprint qualifying was, Mercedes were comfortably quicker than Ferrari, and I think in qualifying Mercedes will be comfortably quicker than Ferrari, because Mercedes, even though they're also quite a bit off the pace, it's not necessarily because their car is an absolute pig compared to what the Ferrari is. So, yeah, Ferrari, the slowest of the front four teams for sure, and again, closer to the front of the midfield than they are to the front of the field overall. And then you had Esteban Ocon in fifth. Haas have been incredibly quick down the straights this weekend, and I think that's because they've gone for very skinny wings. Either that, or they have finally fixed their top speed issue. But I think it's more likely that they have done what Red Bull have done, and they've just trimmed the wings out and are now incredibly quick in the first and final sector. So watch out for them. They were very quick in sprint qualifying, and in the sprint race they maintained their position and got a very good result. So watch out for them in qualifying, especially Ocon. Ocon has always been good at Spa, always been in the points, finishing, 6th, 7th. He finished 5th, I think, one year. Was it 2020? Yeah, 2020, I think it was, with Renault. He may have finished in P5. So yeah, Ocon, always good here to keep your eye on him. Then Carlos Sainz in the Williams. I think Sainz benefiting from some other teams not showing their true pace. I don't think Williams are actually that competitive. Sainz, despite that, still did a good job, but I don't think Williams have got a massively quick car, to be honest. And then Behrman 7th, again, looking quick. Gasly, a shame that in the sprint race he had some sort of problem before the start and ended up starting a couple laps down, because he did a pretty good job to get his car into 8th place. And then just ahead of Isaac Hadjar in 9th and Gabriel Bortoleto in P10. And then the rest of the field, you have Lawson, Tsunoda, George Russell. Again, I don't know why Mercedes didn't get through to the top 10, but when it's a normal qualifying session, Mercedes will be in the top 10, no doubt about it. And Mercedes, I am very confident, are quicker than Ferrari and should be, say, with Russell, if Russell produces his best lap, which he normally does, probably should be 4th on the grid. If they any higher than that, then it's because of a mistake from one of the McLarens or Max Verstappen. But yeah, 4th on the grid, absolutely doable for Mercedes. Aston Martin as well, they ended up 14th and 15th, but there is a lot more pace in that Aston Martin than what was shown in sprint qualifying and the sprint race. I think they've got, at least with Alonso, a top 10 car, but they just didn't get to show it in the sprint sessions, let's just call it that. Alex Albon ended up 16th, disappointing from him, and then Hulkenberg having another poor qualifying, even though it's an omen for a great result for him as of late, of course, after Silverstone. Lewis Hamilton 18th, like I said, he had a downshift issue, that's why he had a spin at the end of the lap, and he didn't do anything in the sprint. And then 19th, Colapinto, who was absolutely diabolically terrible in the sprint, no surprise. And 20th, Kimi Antonelli, who did have a spin at the second Stavolo. Was it the second Stavolo or the exit the first Stavolo? It was. But yeah, Antonelli also did nothing in the sprint. So in terms of performance, again, the sprint qualifying session, it didn't show the true potential I think everyone had, but it showed us mostly what teams I think can do in qualifying in dry conditions around this circuit. So we'll just go through the sector times. And regarding Sector 1, again, Haas clearly have trimmed the wings out on their car, because they were not just first, they were, out of the 20 drivers, they were first and second in Sector 1. So yeah, they have clearly done a great job with the downforce levels of their car, and that's why they are so phenomenally quick down the straights. And then Red Bull just behind it also have trimmed their wings out very nicely. Aston Martin have done a decent job of that, but as you'll see, the middle sector is where it all just fell away from them in sprint qualifying. Alpine have done a decent job of that as well, clearly. And then McLaren, as you can see, compared to Red Bull, it's just over 1/10 of a second in lap time they're losing to Red Bull in the first sector. And that's basically what won Max Verstappen the sprint, because Verstappen had that extra bit of speed with the slipstream, of course, up to Les Combes on the Camel Straight, and then got the move done, and then that extra little bit of speed and good traction off of the first corner of La Source. That's what kept Max ahead and got Max the sprint win. But overall for the lap, of course, that is not doing Red Bull enough to keep them in the fight with McLaren. Williams, not a great top speed. Sauber, not great either. And then Ferrari and Mercedes, I think the reason those two teams are running a bit more wing than, say, you would expect them to, especially compared to other Ferrari and Mercedes powered teams, is because both of them are really searching for the downforce that they're missing compared to McLaren, especially on Ferrari's end. Because with Ferrari, you would expect them to be right up there at the top of the timesheets in the first sector, but yeah, they're one of the slowest teams. And again, it's because their car, handling-wise, is so bad this weekend that they're trying to find as much grip as they can, because they can't afford to run with skinnier wings, because the car fundamentally just doesn't have the grip to handle running that level of downforce, because in the corners they would just be even worse than what they are, and they're already terrible. So that's why they're so slow. Racing Bulls, the slowest in the first sector, and as you'll see in the final sector, also the slowest, which is a shame, because as you'll see in a moment, in the middle sector, they are very, very quick. And through the corners, I've got probably the best midfield car. As you can see here, in the middle sector, they are only bested by McLaren, Red Bull, and Ferrari. So Racing Bulls, through the corners, watch out for them, especially if rain somehow does fall, because that car looks very strong. At the very top, though, McLaren are absolutely miles ahead of the rest. 4.5 tenths quicker than the next car, being the Red Bull and Max Verstappen. And McLaren, the only team to get under 43 seconds in the middle sector. They are, again, miles ahead of the rest. And Ferrari, a full half a second off the pace of McLaren, just in the middle sector. Embarrassing from both Red Bull and Ferrari's perspective. Also, Mercedes, 1.2 seconds off, even though I don't think they showed their true potential in sprint qualifying. They wouldn't have been, any better really than Red Bull and Ferrari. So, yeah, Mercedes also embarrassing. But from McLaren's point of view, this is why they are so quick this weekend, because in the middle part of the lap, their car is on another planet compared to those other cars. And then in the midfield, like I said, Racing Bulls through the corners, it's the best midfield car. It's just when the flat out, straight line speed sections come, that's where they lose the pace. So, yeah, they will be hoping for rain tomorrow, or if there's any around today, they'll be hoping for it, because that will improve their chances. Williams, a bit better in the middle sector. And then Sauber, Haas, obviously a bit of a drop-off considering their, downforce situation. And then, Mercedes and Aston Martin, the two slowest teams in the middle sector. But again, I'm sure they've got a lot more potential to show in this part of the lap compared to what they actually did show. And then the final sector is flat out, except for the final chicane. And that's the only difference, really, between the McLaren and the Red Bull, is that final chicane speed. And McLaren, as we have seen this season in slow or medium speed corners, the McLaren is just another level compared to the rest of the teams. And it's because the front end of that McLaren is so sharp, it is so on point, whilst the Red Bull front end just isn't quite there. And the same with Ferrari and the Mercedes, it just isn't on the same level as what McLaren have. Haas, again, very quick in this ultra high speed part of the lap. Alpine as well, who have clearly done well on the trimming downforce end. Ferrari, couple tenths off in the final sector. They should be a bit closer than that, but it wouldn't really make a difference to them. It's the middle sector that is the problem for Ferrari. And then with Aston Martin, you've got them next, then Williams, and then Mercedes, Sauber, and then again, Racing Bulls, the slowest of the teams in the final sector. Maybe, and it depends really on what the weather's going to be tomorrow. If it is going to be a dry race tomorrow, it might be worth Racing Bulls cutting a slight bit of wing off just to help them a bit. But one point I do want to make in regards to why Ferrari are so slow is, and the proof of it is, they are half a tenth slower than Red Bull in the middle sector, and Red Bull are running basically a Monza style setup, which in the middle sector should be really bad for them. Yet they're still quicker, Red Bull, than Ferrari, who are running with way more wing and way more downforce. Which really illustrates just how bad that Ferrari is this weekend. That they still cannot outpace a Red Bull that is running with such minimal downforce levels that should be really bad for them. And it is for them compared to McLaren, but compared to Ferrari, they're still not losing any time. Again, that is really bad, and it just really emphasizes how bad the Ferrari is this weekend. Again, they will be very fortunate, Ferrari, to be not just on the podium, but anywhere near the podium this weekend. The car is so awful, which is such a shame, because I really hoped that this new suspension upgrade was going to work. Because I thought Ferrari, at this type of Grand Prix, if they had a car balance-wise that was working like it did at Silverstone in the dry, I thought they potentially could fight for the win this weekend. But they are nowhere near fighting for the win in any conditions. They are nowhere near. I mean, look at the sprint. Leclerc finished, 6 or 7 seconds off the lead. And the lead car was not the McLaren, it was the Red Bull. So they're losing in race conditions half a second a lap to Red Bull. Never mind McLaren. So imagine if McLaren had clear air, they'd probably lose a second a lap. Again, it is really, really bad if you are a Ferrari fan, but that's the way it is. And yeah, Ferrari, the best they can get today is a third row grid position, but again, they will be nowhere near the podium on Sunday because they are so poor. But because of sprint qualifying, if we just go back to these results, because sprint qualifying didn't quite show us, I think, the true potential of all the cars. In terms of the pecking order, I think it is a bit different from what sprint qualifying may have shown. McLaren obviously have the best car. That is not up for debate. The second best car, I would say, is probably the Red Bull. Not that far ahead of, I'd say, Mercedes third, and then Ferrari clearly miles away in fourth. Fifth, I think Aston Martin. I think in this session, especially with Alonso at the wheel, I think you'll see them a lot better than what they showed in sprint qualifying and the sprint race. So Aston Martin, I think, will be fifth. Sixth, I'll probably go Racing Bulls. And then seventh, honestly, it's so hard to say because you've got Williams, Haas, Alpine, Sauber as well. So in terms of the rest of the field, it's really hard to say. But I think the two best midfield teams will be Aston Martin and Racing Bulls. But yeah, for the front four teams, McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari. No doubt in my mind about that. And in regards to that, let's get into my final prediction for qualifying, which is coming up in about an hour. And Oscar Piastri will take pole position by only a couple tenths of a second. The reason I think it'll be a couple tenths is because I think McLaren will, as a precaution, because of what happened in the sprint, I think they will take a slight bit of wing off their car, which will hurt their pace in the middle sector and bring down the gap between them and Red Bull, but McLaren still comfortably will get pole. So Piastri, I think, will be on pole. Verstappen second, Norris third, George Russell, I think, will be fourth, and Leclerc, I'm going fifth ahead of Antonelli, purely because Leclerc is so good around this track. I think he will somehow drag that car into splitting the two Mercedes, but no way is he getting ahead of the two Mercedes unless Mercedes really, mess up in qualifying. Antonelli, I think, will be sixth, Hamilton seventh, and then I'm going Alonso eighth, Isaac Hadjar in ninth, and Carlos Sainz, I think, will round out the top 10 for Williams. Carlos, another driver to watch out for around this circuit. He has been decent pace-wise in the last few years. So that's my top 10 prediction for qualifying. There is a poll running, of course, in the live chat. Let me know in that poll or in the chat, who do you think takes pole? And what do you think the top 3 or top 5 will be in qualifying today? Make sure to let me know. And make sure as well, if you haven't already, to smash the like button. We're on 13 likes. Let's try and get up to, 25 plus likes if we can in the next few minutes or so. And let me just go back to here and get the timer back on the screen, as we have got an hour to go now until qualifying is underway. I'll just wait for the next minute to tick over. Weather-wise, if you're wondering what it's like, it is dry and looking at the forecast, it should remain dry for the rest of the day at Spa. In regards to tomorrow, though, looks like we're going to have quite a bit of rain in the morning, but then after that, it might dry up. We'll have to see. It's all over the place in regards to tomorrow. Anyway, let me scroll up in the chat, because what we're going to do now is, for the next half an hour or so, we are going to go through your comments and your thoughts in the chat before qualifying. Or actually, there is a couple things I do want to get into before we get into your comments. First things first, I do want to quickly touch on the news, of course, that Christian Horner was sacked by Red Bull. This happened, was it 2 weeks ago? For me, not a surprise. The results of Red Bull have gone down massively in the last year and a half, and it's because of him. The allegations is the beginning of what has destroyed this team, and Red Bull made the wrong decision in choosing Christian Horner over more important figures for the team in Adrian Newey, Jonathan Wheatley, who's gone to Sauber and already doing miracles, and nearly chose Horner over Max Verstappen, who was possibly looking to leave. But now that Horner is gone, looks like Max is going to be staying at Red Bull at least until the end of next season, which is what I was thinking was going to happen anyway, even if Horner stayed at the team. But yeah, the right decision was made, but it was just way too late. This should have happened a year and a half ago, as far as I'm concerned. I know people, and I'm not going to relitigate the whole discussion around it, and I know people disagree, or not everyone disagrees with, my thoughts on the whole Christian Horner allegation situation, but he should not have kept his job, especially when more important figures at the team were threatening to and did leave because of the internal split caused by Horner's behaviour. So the right decision was made, but it's too little too late, because they've lost two very important figures, and the most important figure that they had, which was Adrian Newey. Max Verstappen is an amazing driver, but the most important cog in the Red Bull machine was Adrian Newey. Don't get that twisted. But yeah, Red Bull, too little too late, and now Laurent Mekies is the Red Bull team boss. There are rumours that Christian Horner might be coming back into F1, maybe to join Alpine, which would be mental. Him and Flavio at Alpine would just be psychotic, quite frankly. But I think Horner will come back to Formula One. I don't think it'll be with Alpine. He will come back, but I think he will take probably a year or so out of Formula One. He will not stay away. No way. Horner will be back. He's not just going to go away. So, yeah. Christian Horner will be back in Formula One at some point. But, again, right decision made, but just way too late. And the damage has already been done, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to Red Bull. So, yeah, that decision, we'll see if it improves the situation at Red Bull any going forward. But I think it's just too little too late on that front. But another thing I want to quickly get into before I go through your comments is, just a quick channel update, because we have the summer break coming up in just over a week's time. So in the summer break, there will be 3 quite long recorded videos coming your way. Those 3 videos will be, 1, a driver lineup prediction video with a twist. It's not going to be quite what you expect, that driver lineup prediction video. That's all I'll say regarding that. The second video will be a driver rankings video, where I'll be ranking the drivers from 21st all the way to 1st in terms of who's been the best and who's been the absolute worst driver in 2025 so far. That will be coming out. And then the third and last video will be a video talking about the championship battle between the two McLarens, where I will go through who I think will win the championship, and I will also predict the podium results of the remaining races on the calendar from Zandvoort all the way to Abu Dhabi in predicting who I think will win the 2025 Drivers' Championship. So that will be coming out probably, that Drivers' Championship video will probably come out about a week or so before the Dutch Grand Prix. But yeah, those three videos is what's coming during the summer break. So yeah, it should be the driver lineup prediction video should be the first video, and then the second one will be the driver rankings, and then the third one will be the predicting the rest of the season and the Drivers' Championship battle. So yeah, that's what we'll be going through in that video. In terms of the plan between now and the start of the summer break, obviously I'm streaming today. Tomorrow I will be live for the race watch along, usual time. I'll be live 2 hours before lights out. In this case, tomorrow I'll be live at 12 p.m. UK time for a 2 p.m. race start. Niblo, my co-commentator, will be joining me tomorrow. And then, obviously, on Monday, there'll be a podcast reviewing this Grand Prix. But then, next weekend, I will be doing a qualifying watch-along, but I will not be doing a race watch-along. And there are two reasons for that. One, I've already looked at the weather forecast for next weekend's Grand Prix in Hungary, and it's going to be very hot and dry. Meaning, we're not going to have really any overtaking in the race next week in Budapest. But also, McLaren are so far ahead of the others, especially around a track like that, that I think next weekend is just going to be pure McLaren domination, and no one is going to stand a chance around that circuit. So next weekend there will only be a qualifying watch along. So technically, tomorrow will be the last race watch along until at least the Dutch Grand Prix at the end of August. So yeah, that's the plan going forward. And then of course, even though I will miss the race in Hungary, I will do a podcast the day after the Hungarian Grand Prix reviewing whatever happens. And then once that's done, then we will get into the summer break content. So yeah, that is the plan between now and basically the end of the summer break. And then once we come back for the Dutch Grand Prix, I'll announce what the plans are for the Grand Prix going forward, because we've got quite a few races coming up thick and fast as soon as we come back from the summer break. We've got Zandvoort, Monza, Baku, Singapore, and then we're off to the Americas again. But yeah, that's the content update, and I hope you guys will enjoy that content coming your way very, very soon. But now, let's get into your comments in the chat. And actually, before I do, let me just have a quick drink, and then we will go through your comments probably for the next half an hour or so. And then I'll do a quick roundup of the teams, as I usually do, as to how they should all perform in this qualifying session. And then we'll get on to some final things before the session is underway. Right, so let's see what some of you have to say. And hello to all of you in the chat and everyone watching. I hope you're all doing well. Astro, good to see you. Says, love this track. Hard to believe they leave it off the calendar ever. Well, yeah, eventually that's going to happen, isn't it? Is it 2027 or 2029? I think it is. It's going to be off the calendar for a year, which, yeah, is absolute bullshit. Astrosy seems Max is staying at Red Bull for another year. Too chicken to change teams and try and win with a serious rival and equal machines. And in a different team, not solely built around him. There's no problem with doing that. You know, having a team built around you, for a driver, it's a lot easier than going to a team that's, you know, already maybe built around another driver and competing against them. It doesn't take away from how great Max is. So, yeah. I mean, you know, you could have easily said the same about Michael Schumacher back in the day. Of, you know, the team being built around him and him never having a competitive teammate. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, if you were in Max's shoes, I think staying at Red Bull another year is probably the sensible thing to do, because we don't know still who's going to be competitive next year. Let me find some comments here if I can. Hello to Rooks, good to see you. Dane says, I'm quite curious in dry conditions who is faster, Hamilton or Leclerc this weekend. Looks so far like it's probably Leclerc. In practice, Leclerc was, I think, a tenth and a half quicker than Hamilton. So, I mean, Lewis has always been great around here, so Lewis will be, you know, not that far behind Leclerc if Leclerc is quicker, but there's a much bigger issue at hand, which is the Ferrari car is absolute dog shit. Hello to Polish Eddie, good to see you. If they're from DNFs except for Leclerc and Hamilton, then it's a 1-2. I keep hoping. If it was 30 years ago, then that hope would be somewhat legitimate, given how unreliable cars were back then. But yeah, these days, no chance of that happening. I don't see Lewis in Q3. I think he'll make Q3. The Ferrari isn't that bad. Yeah, the Ferrari's not that bad to, you know, to miss Q3. And plus, Hamilton, you know, this is one of his better circuits. So, and obviously remember, Lewis Hamilton, seems a long time ago, given just what's happened since, you know, in the last year. But Lewis Hamilton did win this race last year. So let's not forget that. And it was a great performance by Hamilton as well in that race. Pedro Shelley saying, I've been stagnant on content because I lost my sister a month and a half ago, so it's been rough, couldn't function for a while. Sorry to hear about that. Hopefully you're doing better. Astra saying, good riddance, Horner, never could stand him. Yeah, there were many that could not stand him, which I can understand why. He can be a bit of a prick. But, yeah. he is now gone from Red Bull after, what, 20 years. I will probably make a video on Christian Horner and his time at Red Bull at some point. Don't know when. Probably between now and the end of the year. Maybe it'll be something I do in the off season. But yeah, I will do a video on Christian Horner's time at Red Bull, because obviously what he did at Red Bull was great in terms of what he helped turn the team into, but I think there are some things that need clarifying in terms of what he was responsible for. There were certain decisions that he made that he absolutely got right, but you know, I think he, I think he, at least himself, has overrated his just how important he was to Red Bull's overall success. I think McKees will help the team go from Verstappen fighting for wins and Tsunoda at the back to Verstappen in around 4th and Tsunoda in around 7th for balance. Well, I mean, before Horner left, that Verstappen was fighting around 3rd and 4th sometimes still anyway. So yeah, but in terms of how Laurent Mekies will do, I have no idea, to be honest. I do get the feeling he's a bit of a placeholder in terms of he's only holding that role until Red Bull finds someone else, possibly. Because I don't see him as a long-term team boss of Red Bull. I just don't. I don't see it. Todd says, congrats to Max for a masterful sprint race. It was a great drive from Max to keep himself far enough ahead where he needed to, so that the McLarens weren't able to try for an overtake. It was, in terms of defensive driving, it was a really great example of how to do it, especially when you have those circumstances of, you having clearly a slower car through the corners, but having the pace down the straights. And again, Max showing why, from a defensive point of view, why he is, I think, quite easily the best in terms of defending and keeping himself ahead. Max is easily the hardest driver to overtake. Sometimes because of wrong reasons, but sometimes because of very good reason. Astro gives his prediction. Oscar for pole, and then Russell, Norris, Lewis, Leclerc, Bortoletto, Behrman, Antonelli, Tsunoda, Ocon. 4th and 5th for Ferrari would be way too good for them, considering their pace, but we'll see. Who knows? I think Verstappen is still in the title fight. Says, I can't quite see what that username is because it's got weird font, but they say, I think Verstappen is still in the title fight. I admire your confidence, but I think the last Grand Prix at Silverstone, I think, was the last straw, because these last few races, Max has just not scored enough points to keep up. Obviously, had the race in Spain where he, got that penalty, ended up in P10, and then obviously the race in Austria, we got took out by Antonelli. And then obviously at Silverstone, had that spin, which I don't really think was his fault. that much, and only finished in P5. So yeah, I just don't think Max is able to do it. The championship lead is, I think, 68 points. It is between Piastri and Verstappen. Not impossible, but it would, again, Red Bull need to improve their car significantly if Max is going to fight for the championship legitimately, because the car at the minute is, I mean, again, if you were to put Lando in that Red Bull would be comfortably probably 3/4 of a second off the pace of the McLaren. The only reason they're within half a second is because of Max, and still there's that massive gap. So yeah, it's going to take something very special to turn things around. For me, like I said, it's over. But stranger things have happened, I guess. But yeah, I just don't see it happening, I'm afraid. I think the championship battle is between the two McLarens. And I think this weekend, unless of a miracle from Max Verstappen, I think this weekend Oscar Piastri takes the win. And then next weekend in Hungary, I think McLaren will get an easy 1-2 finish. Not sure who will win. I'd probably lean towards Piastri, but yeah, we'll have to see. Rook saying, let's just worry about that Ford engine for Red Bull's future. Well, I mean, the thing is, it's like that whole thing for 2026. It's basically Ford and the Red Bull powertrain people working together. Red Bull, their strong suit has not been engines in terms of, if you look at their time in Formula One. They are great when it comes to chassis and aero design. But, rightly, they've left the engine stuff to others. Renault and the V8 days and Honda in recent times. And even though, yes, technically they've been Red Bull powertrains for the last few years, we know that's bullshit. It's actually Honda, which is in the back of that Red Bull. So I would not be surprised whatsoever if Red Bull next season were a midfield team. Would not be surprised. And in fact, I think they'll be quite lucky to, if Max does officially stay for next season, they'll be very fortunate to have him, because if they went into next season with Tsunoda and Hadjar as their lineup, I think they would be probably one of the slowest teams on the grid, because I don't have any real hopes for them next season. Wolfgang Janssen, I think it is, says I think Lando will get pole. He was clearly quicker than Oscar in the sprint. That was only because Oscar was held up behind Max. That wasn't Lando being quicker than Oscar. That was the only reason Lando caught up, was because Oscar was held up. If Oscar had got past or had held the lead after the first lap, Oscar would have run away with that race and ended up way ahead of Lando. So yeah, that's. I mean, technically, you're right. He did catch up to Oscar, but that's again only because Oscar was held up by Max. Astra says, was more interesting when drivers had to nurse sick cars or would suddenly blow a turbo or gearbox, etc. And they had spare cars, quality tyres, quality engines, refueling in more good old days. I understand why people prefer the days where we had a lot more unreliability because you got a lot more surprising results. But I think the racing, quite a lot of times back then, suffered because of that, having a lot of DNFs back then. And I think in more recent times, that's why we've had some better racing because of the reliability, which would have made Formula One 30 or 40 years ago even better than it was if the cars back then were reliable, because they definitely were better to drive and a lot more able to race, those cars back then. But again, they were just very unreliable. And races, a lot of times back then, were decided by reliability rather than genuinely being quicker or, getting the job done on track in terms of overtaking and that. So I prefer having, super reliable cars like we have now. Um, I'm just gonna call you Low because again, the font of your name is difficult to see. But their prediction for qualifying is Verstappen to take pole. Interesting. From Piastri, Norris, Russell, Leclerc, Sainz, Antonelli, Hulkenberg, and Hadjar. If Max got pole here, it might be the best pole of his career because, again, McLaren are so much quicker over a single lap than the Red Bull is. So, I mean, we'll see ultimately, but yeah. And yeah, that's better. Now I can see your name. So, Loka. Yeah, cheers for that. Um, Dane asking, should Max race until his 40s to get more championships? I think it's a bit too early, to be honest, to ask that because Max is what? Max's birthday is on September the 30th, is it? Or October the 1st, something like that. Um, and what do you call it? I think Max in October is going to be 28 years old. So his 40 years old, that'll be what, 2037? I think it'll be 2037, 2038, something like that. Again, that's quite far away. It depends on whether he is still ultimately good enough, which, I mean, given how great he is, you would hope that he would still be at a good enough level to win championships and that and compete at the highest level. But ultimately, it depends on also what cars he's having to drive. I don't think he's going to win the championship this year. The thing is, you don't know in Formula One. Last year, Max won his 4th world championship. That might be the last world championship he ever wins. I don't think it will be, but it might be. Look at Fernando Alonso. After he won his 2 championships, if you had asked anyone in the Formula One paddock in 2006, at the end of 2006, when Alonso won his 2nd championship, whether they thought that would be his last, they would all laugh at you. Because they all thought Alonso was going to be probably a 4 or 5-time champion at least, and maybe even rival Michael Schumacher, given how great Alonso had proven to be in 2006 against Michael, even though it wasn't the best version of Michael. So, you never know in Formula One. You really never know. So, yeah, well, it depends on what his level is and what level of car he has. The advantage, though, as long as he's not as volatile as Fernando Alonso was and has been in his career, the advantage that Max will have is because he is the best driver on the grid. If an opening ever comes up at a team that is able to fight for a championship and Max is available, he is obviously always going to be the number one choice. So he has that advantage going forward for the rest of his career. So, yeah. I think he will end up at Mercedes, but I don't think, again, it will be next season. But we'll see. Quickly, though, before I read any more comments out, make sure to keep them coming. I'm just going to quickly post a link of the stream out one final time, as we've got about half an hour to go until qualifying is underway. Come join us here to Watchalong qualifying at Spa. So there you go, and hopefully we'll get some more people joining soon. Alonso deserved more titles. Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of actually winning more championships, it's, it's sad to say this, but it's just the way Formula One has always been. The most important thing to win a Formula One Drivers' Championship is having a good enough car. It's not like tennis where it's all down to how good of a player you are as to how many Grand Slams you win. In Formula One, yes, you yourself need to be a very high elite driver, but you also need to combine that fortune. You need to combine that, fortunately, with a fast enough car, and not everyone in their careers has been able to do that for various reasons, and that's why we still debate to this day who is the greatest of all time, who is where in our top whatever lists. So again, with Max, maybe last year's championship with the last championship he ever wins. Again, I don't think that'll be the case. I think Max will win definitely another championship. Probably, I think him winning championships at Red Bull is over. I don't think he'll win another championship at Red Bull unless he rejoins Red Bull later in his career. If Red Bull are in a situation where they're back to being a great team again. But yeah, I think Max will win a championship again. But with next year's regulations, who knows who's going to be where? 2026, next year's regulations, it's the biggest new set of regulations we've had in 12 years. So who knows who can end up where? We really don't know. And with so many different engine manufacturers, Ferrari, Mercedes, Honda, Audi, and then obviously you're going to have General Motors coming in as well, Ford. So we have no idea. We might get one team absolutely dominating like we had in 2014, or we might get a situation like in 2009, which is personally what I'm hoping for, where the field from the year previous is basically turned upside down. That would be great if we had, say, Audi and, I don't know, Aston Martin at the front, and then you had, your McLarens and Ferraris more towards the back. That would be great in terms of really switching things up. But who knows? Who knows? We will find out next year. That is the beauty of a new set of regulations that are as big of a change as what we're going to have next year, that until they get out on track, you just don't know. Brabham saying we all know Latifi is the GOAT. Exactly. Good to see you, by the way. Who's the greatest driver to never win a championship? It's still got to be Sterling Moss. I can't think. I mean, people will say Gilles Villeneuve, but I think Sterling Moss has still got to be that guy. Which I think most people still say. But yeah, you got Sterling Moss, Gilles Villeneuve, and then what are the? It's difficult to look at the current grid and add them to that conversation, because Charles Leclerc obviously is not a world champion. George Russell isn't, but I think they're both world champion level drivers, and I think they will probably end up at some point with a championship. So I wouldn't include them in that conversation right now, because especially those two have got a very long way to go in their career. Daniel Ricciardo, Mark Webber, yeah, you could put them in that conversation. But I think Sterling Moss would have to be number one in that conversation. Right. I'll just read a couple more comments, and then I'll quickly do a quick roundup of the teams as to how they should all perform in qualifying. Make sure to smash the like button, by the way. We're on 28 likes. Let's try and get up to 40 plus likes if we can in the next few minutes. That'd be great if we could do that. Brevin says, I think Charles won't ever do it. I think he will. I think eventually he will leave Ferrari. I don't think he's dumb enough to stay with them his whole career in the hope that eventually he'll win a championship with them. I think eventually he will leave and he will go to a team that will be able to help him in that pursuit. Felipe Massa, not sure he'd be one of the best candidates for that. And Montoya was insane at Williams. Yeah. Montoya, in his prime, was an incredibly quick, talented driver, but didn't last very long, unfortunately. Anyway, keep your comments coming. I will get to some more before we get into qualifying. Let me just quickly go through the teams and round up how they should all be performing in this session coming up in 20 minutes' time. McLaren have to get pole position. They cannot afford to let Max somehow sneak his way up onto pole. The car is so easily quicker than everything else. Unless the drivers make a big mistake, I just don't see how that could happen. But Lando Norris, compared to what he was doing in sprint qualifying, has got to step it up. He must make sure he is at least second. Cannot afford to be behind Oscar on the grid. Be behind Max, on the grid. Because Max, as what was proven in the sprint, it's not going to be easy to overtake in the race, dry or wet. So Lando has got to be on the front row of the grid, no doubt about it. Especially if he wants to properly challenge Oscar for the race win. Oscar has proven to be the quicker McLaren driver this weekend. But yeah, McLaren easily the quickest team. if they don't lock out the front row, it's because of Max Verstappen doing his usual or Lando Norris not performing well enough. And yeah, for Red Bull, all their hopes pinned on Max Verstappen. Max will end up at worst third, which is, I mean, given the pace of the car, is good enough. But yeah, Max, unfortunately, can't fight really for the pole or the win this weekend because that McLaren is just too good. And even though he held on for the sprint win, remember the race is 30 laps longer tomorrow. So holding on for that long tomorrow would be nigh on impossible. For Ferrari, yeah, miles off the pace, the slowest of the front four teams as far as I'm concerned. If they get onto the third row, that would be probably the best they could do in this session. But yeah, I have no hopes when it comes to Ferrari today. Rubbish car. The two drivers are doing the best they can, but the car has no grip at all. Rear end, front end, absolute garbage. So yeah, Ferrari, as long as they don't end up embarrassing themselves, getting knocked out in Q2, then yeah, they just need to end up, I don't know, 5th and 7th, 5th and 6th, 6th and 7th. That's where they're going to end up. Mercedes, I think, will be quicker than Ferrari today. George Russell should end up behind the two McLarens and Max in the Red Bull. For Antonelli, I hope he does step it up in this session and is a bit closer to Russell over a single lap, because if he is, then he can get himself ahead of the two Ferrari cars, which really he should be doing because the two Ferraris are quite clearly slower than the Mercedes car, I think, when they're both showing their true potential. So, yeah, Mercedes, they should be at least with one of their cars quicker. We'll see with Antonelli what he can do, but George Russell, keep your eye on him. We know he can produce special laps. He's not going to be on pole or anything, but he might be able to put himself right in the sharp end of the grid. Aston Martin, I think, will have a much better qualifying today than what they had yesterday. Fernando Alonso, I think, will get into the top 10 and be one of the best of the rest cars or drivers after the top 7. Yeah, expect Alonso in the top 10. Pierre Gasly did a great job yesterday for Alpine, but today I'd be surprised if he got that car into Q3. I think Q2 more likely. Colapinto, I'd be amazed if he gets out of Q1. Do keep your eye on Haas. They've been very quick this weekend with their setup. Basically the same as Red Bull, cutting a lot of wing off and being very quick down the straights. If they can continue getting that right as they have done so far, maybe they can have as great of a qualifying today as they had yesterday. So keep your eye on them. They are looking good. Also, keep your eye on Racing Bulls. In the corners, they look like they've got the best car out of the midfield, but it's just in a straight line. They're just losing too much pace. So we may see a slight setup change for their Racing Bulls team just to try and improve in that area. But again, through the corners, very, very good car. So watch out for Hadjar and Lawson. Williams look decent this weekend. In the dry, I'd say they look probably better than they did at Silverstone, but still not amazing or anything like that. Might be able to get into the top 10. It's going to be close with them and Haas, Alpine, teams like that. But yeah, Williams, definitely not a sure bet to make the top 10. And then Sauber, I mean, Bortoleto made the top 10 in sprint qualifying, but I'd be surprised if we could do that again. We'll see. Most importantly, who ends up ahead in qualifying, Bortoleto or Hülkenberg? Hülkenberg in the races has been absolutely amazing this season, but Bortoleto is ahead of Hülkenberg in the qualifying head-to-head. So it'll be interesting to see whether that continues in this session. But Sauber, at best, will get both cars into Q2, but I don't see them as top 10 material. But here is my prediction for qualifying. Piastri on pole, Verstappen 2nd, Norris 3rd, Russell 4th, Leclerc 5th, Antonelli 6th, Hamilton 7th, Alonso 8th, Hadjar 9th, and Carlos Sainz, I think, will end up in P10. as we have got just under 15 minutes to go until qualifying is underway. So let me just get the timer ready, and once the next minute ticks over, I'll get it on the screen, and then we'll just go through some final comments from you guys before we get into the actual session itself. And then right before we get into the session, of course, I'll go through the championship standings, which are slightly different after the sprint race. And we'll go through some key stats for the teams as well. But there you go. 14 minutes remain. Bravo Moss saying, Piastri's old man has bought the factory next mine as a bit of a man cave. Got to say, it's kind of strange seeing him turning up from time to time. That's great. Let me find some other good comments before we get into things. Dane saying Nico Hulkenberg, he is better than Sainz. In terms of this season, I think Hulkenberg has been better than Sainz, but I think when they're both at their best, I think Carlos is better. The thing is, though, again, this season, it's just been so weird from Carlos Sainz's perspective because the Williams car has been pretty good most of the time, yet Carlos has been, I think, pretty poor this season, and that will be reflected in my driver rankings video for the season so far. Yeah, Sainz has really not been good and has been arguably the most disappointing driver of the season as Carlos Sainz. He's been, not good. And this season so far has definitely hurt his stock and reputation. Not that Alex Albon is a rubbish driver, but, given what Sainz had done at Ferrari, which was, I thought, a mostly good job, there was a bit expected of Carlos coming into this season compared to Albon, but yeah, Carlos has really not been on it. Sarah Gara says, incoming worst champion since Formula One has been on television. I don't know if you're talking about Oscar Piastri there. Yes, Say says he is. I think that's very harsh, to be honest. I think you could argue Jacques Villeneuve and Damon Hill were, worse. I think there's definitely an argument for that. And they had an even more dominant car than what Piastri has had this season. And I've seen people saying, on social media, we have the two worst contenders for the championship, and the whoever the world champion, or the quality of the world champion this year is not going to be that great. Who cares? It's irrelevant. I think the people complaining about, are they what do you call it? the quality of whoever's going to win the championship this year is not great. The people, I'm not saying everyone, but most of the people complaining about that are coincidentally fans of rival drivers like Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell. I don't see why really it's relevant in terms of the quality of the world champion. In terms of whoever wins it, I don't really see. Since I've started watching Formula One, I've never considered that as a thing, to be honest, in terms of how great or not so great compared to others the world champion is going to be compared to other maybe great drivers who've won it recently. To me, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, again, as I explained earlier, if you're going to win the Drivers' Championship, you need the car first. And McLaren clearly have the best car and have had the best car this year. That's why they're in the position they're in, and that's why the only two championship contenders are, coincidentally, the two McLaren drivers. So, that's the way it's going to be. And yeah, are Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris the two best drivers on the grid? Of course not, but it's irrelevant. Again, we've had other years, like I said, in 96, 97, where Damon Hill, Jacques Villeneuve, they weren't the best driver on the grid. Not at all. They probably weren't even the second best driver on the grid. But because of the pace of the cars that year, that's just how it happened to be. So, yeah. Right. Let me find a couple more comments if I can. Brabham saying Max's 2023 car wasn't as dominant. Lewis cars have been as dominant. I mean, in terms of results, people will say, "Oh, the 2023 Red Bull was, a massively dominant car and was miles ahead of everybody else." But if you actually look at the pace difference between the Red Bull and the next best car in 2023 compared to the Mercedes in 2020, the Mercedes car in 2020 was a better car. Just, again, a fact in terms of, the pace difference between them and the rest. And there definitely were, in 2023, there were races where Max had to make the difference himself to make sure he got the win. Obviously, the Red Bull car was good at every race, or great at every race, but it wasn't always great to the point where it gave him the win automatically. There were races like that, no doubt, but, Monaco that year, in an example, he delivered the pole lap, which, the lap he delivered, he had to deliver if he wanted pole. The car wasn't going to put him on pole. I mean, the win he had in Las Vegas that year, a win that I don't think he really deserved, but he got because he took advantage of Leclerc's bad luck. He had a win at Monza as well, which I thought was a really good win. And also, I think the win he had at Silverstone that year was a really good win because the McLaren was only a couple tenths off the pace of the Red Bull. And I think pace-wise, they were on pretty much similar performance. But Max, I think, ultimately made the difference in getting that win. So, yeah. But anyway, let me just have a quick check of social media, see if there's any news I can bring you guys. And no, I can't see anything at the moment. Anyway, let's move on because qualifying is about to begin. And let's get into a couple final details that you need to know before the session begins. Firstly, the championship standings, which are slightly different after the sprint race. Oscar Piastri now 9 points clear of Lando Norris in the Drivers' Championship battle. Max Verstappen third, 68 points off. Maybe to some of you, he's still in the fight, but for me, he's a bit too far away. George Russell fourth, Leclerc fifth, Hamilton sixth, Antonelli seventh, Albon in eighth, Hulkenberg ninth, Ocon a few points closer in P10. And on the constructor side, McLaren miles clear of everybody else. Ferrari second, Mercedes not far behind, 17 points behind in third. Red Bull 30 points behind Mercedes in fourth, and then Williams fifth. And then look how close it is to the midfield. Sauber sixth, only 4 points clear of Racing Bull seventh, who are only 1 point clear of Aston Martin, who are only 1 point clear of Haas. 6 points separating 4 teams. And those positions very, very important. And then Alpine, last of all, a bit cut adrift, but I think they can still make it up going forward. Those in terms of the points they are behind. There's still plenty of races to go in this Formula One season. But let's get on to the team stats. McLaren, their last pole position here at Spa was in 2012 with Jenson Button. That was also their last win at Spa. In the last 20 years, though, they've only taken 3 pole positions here at Spa. Montoya in 2005 had a pole here, and Lewis Hamilton in 2008, along with Jenson Button in 2012. Last year, they only qualified on the 3rd row. I'm sure they'll do a lot better today. For Red Bull, their last pole position, technically, with Max Verstappen, was in 2021. Max has ended up quickest in the last 3 qualifying sessions here, but has had grid penalties, which is why he's not actually officially took or started on pole. So Red Bull have only technically had 1 pole position in the last 10 years here at Spa. Last year, though, officially, in the session, they finished 1st and 3rd. Be amazing if they were to finish 1st today and actually take pole, but realistically, doesn't look like it's going to happen. Ferrari, their last pole at Spa, technically was last year Charles Leclerc, who he finished 2nd in the session, but again started on pole because Max Verstappen had his grid penalty. And because of those grid penalties in previous years, Ferrari have taken pole at Spa 4 times in the last 10 years. Last year, 2nd and 8th it was in the qualifying session. It would be a miracle for Ferrari to be on the front row for this Grand Prix, given how slow they look. As for Mercedes, their last pole at Spa was 5 years ago with Lewis Hamilton, and they have taken pole 5 times at Spa in the last 10 years. Last year, 4th and 7th it was in qualifying. That's pretty much what they should be aiming for in this session. But ultimately, let's see how the teams will shake out in qualifying at Spa. And qualifying is about to get underway in the next minute or so. And Q1 will be an 18-minute long session. I'll sync up the timer at the 17-minute mark, as all the drivers are in the pit lane waiting to get out, probably because of a small threat of rain. They don't want to be caught out. And by the way, interesting tyre situation this weekend. Pirelli have brought the C4, C3, and then skipped a compound and brought the C1 tyre as the hard compound tyre. But that hard compound tyre is not going to get used at all, even tomorrow, because even though it's very durable, it is so incredibly slow. So, yeah, the hard tyre we're not going to see whatsoever. As actually, I'll sync up the timer at the 18-minute mark. As, oh no, I didn't have the right thing selected. So no, I won't. I'll sync it up at the 17 minute mark. As an incident noted for an unsafe release between Behrman and Alonso. They showed it on the broadcast, but I was looking away at the time, so yeah, can't comment on it. But the session has begun. Qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix is underway. Let's find out who, firstly, will be eliminated in Q1. The best lap time of the weekend so far, as this is a Sauber who may have had a collision with someone in the pit lane. Looks like they have, having their front wing replaced. And it's Nico Hulkenberg, it looks like. And, yep, Hulkenberg tried to pull forward, and then Stroll ran over a small part of the front wing. So, yeah, that was just a complete joke there. Incredibly clumsy from both Hulkenberg and Stroll. Hulkenberg should have just waited. I'll sync up the timer at the 16-minute mark now because they hit the timer and I wasn't able to see when it ticked over to 17 minutes. One thing I was going to say is, yeah, the quickest time of the weekend so far is a 1:40.5. Pole position will be between a 1:40 and a 1:40.5. So in this session, to get through to Q2, you're going to need to do probably a 1:42 point something lap time at least. As there you go. Let me just adjust the position there. So yeah, if you do, say, a 1:42.9, then I think that will be just about enough to get through to Q2. But if you do a 1:43 or slower, then I think that is probably not going to be good enough to get through. Remember, by the way, guys, the poll in the chat is still running and will keep running until the start of Q3. So if you haven't decided yet who you think is going to get polled, you still have got another 45 minutes to decide. As we look at Carlos Sainz, who starts his first qualifying lap. Carlos started on pole here 3 years ago for Ferrari, and that was his only podium at Spa that weekend. As he bounces his way along the Camel Straight up to the end of the first sector. A 30.4, which is not good. The best first sector time yesterday was a 29.7 from Esteban Ocon. So, yeah, that is quite slow. But this is only the first lap, so we'll give him a bit of a break. As through Pouan he comes. Brilliant corner. And now into the Fania chicane, which is one of my favourite parts of the Spa circuit. Now into the two Stabilos. And yeah, looking at the lap, there's no obvious handling issues, but I don't think this is going to be setting the world alight pace-wise this lap. As he comes into the chicane, and yeah, he's coming into the pit lane. So not going to bother anymore with that lap. As we now look at Haas with the very skinny rear wing, which is really helping them this weekend. Especially in the hands of Esteban Ocon, who's always been strong here. Remember, he qualified third here in 2018 in absolutely very tricky, wet, dry conditions. as Lando Norris and now Oscar Piastri has gone quickest on a 1:41.9, which is a pretty good start to qualifying from Piastri there. And really from both McLarens, very strong lap times to start as Ocon now comes into the pit lane. Don't know why they wouldn't just complete the lap. And in comes Hulkenberg as well. There can't be rain falling. But clearly they're not happy with, I don't know, the tyres or whatever. But yeah. But we've got Lewis Hamilton out there on a lap right now. But we're not looking at him. Now Antonelli's on a lap. As Hamilton has also now pitted. As the two Mercedes are now on flying laps. We're looking at Max Verstappen though. And yeah, if Max is to get pole, then he needs to aim for a low 1:40 or a mid 1:40 if he's to put himself somehow on pole. But we'll see what this first lap time does for him. As he starts the lap. And into turn 1 he goes. Max is easily the best driver around this circuit. I remember, I think last year he was finished first in qualifying. Obviously had the grid penalty, but finished first in qualifying, was I think 7 or 8 tenths clear of the next car. As Max completes the first sector, actually slower than Piastri through the first sector by 0.03 of a second. Now into, I think, which is still no name. Now into the Jackie X corner. And yeah, lap looks good so far, but we'll see what the lap time looks like at the end of the middle sector. As he's got a slight bit of traffic, which doesn't hold him up. Now through the Fanny chicane. Through the high-speed corners, the car's good. It's just, again, it's the slow and medium-speed corners. The front end just is not there on this Red Bull to compete with the McLaren, as he's only a tenth off Piastri after the first 2 sectors. So this is a good lap from Max, as Russell has gone third. With Antonelli in fourth, but we'll just wait to see where Max goes with this lap. As Verstappen goes second on a 1:42.0. That's a good start from Max. Splitting the McLarens as Liam Lawson does a purple middle sector. Racing Bulls have been very quick in the middle sector all weekend, as Sonoda does a 42.3. That's a great start for him. Exactly what he needs if he's to get through to Q2. As you got Russell 5th, Antonelli 6th, and Liam Lawson goes quickest. 1:41.7. That's a very, very good lap time. Very impressive stuff there by Lawson and Racing Bulls, who I do fancy to have a good qualifying here. Albon goes second. Behrman, with the skinny wings, goes third. As now Carlos Sainz goes just about quickest on a 1:41.6. So the upper midfield looking pretty quick. A lot quicker than I was expecting. As Hadjar goes 8th. Got Alonso now in P10 ahead of Russell. And then you've got Stroll, Antonelli, and then Bortoletto. As here is Charles Leclerc, who goes quickest. Not by much, though, over Carlos Sainz. As Esteban Ocon, only 13th. Which is very disappointing. As here is Lewis Hamilton, who's just in a purple first sector. Where can he go? Only 6th. So Hamilton up to P6. Both Ferraris, though, already, I think, comfortably with those lap times, good enough for Q2. As Pierre Gasly is up to 10th. Hulkenberg is in 12th. And then you've got Tsunoda, Ocon, Alonso. And then in the drop zone, Colapinto, Russell, Stroll, Antonelli, and Bortoletto. So both Mercedes in the drop zone. As here is Lando Norris on a new lap. 2/10 off, though, after the first sector. That's not a good start. Obviously, the McLaren is now going to be very quick in the middle sector. And we'll see what he does for that middle sector. It does, by the way, look like that with Red Bull, looks like Red Bull have added maybe a tad more wing to their car compared to what they were running in the sprint, and that's probably in view to tomorrow's race, where we're probably going to have a wet race. As Lando Norris does a very quick middle sector, and he's going to go quickest of this lap time. And I was about to say, we're going to have to probably adjust my own personal view of what the best times or what lap times you'll need to do to get through to the next part of qualifying. As Lando Norris does a 1:41.0. That is an incredibly quick lap time, 6/10 quicker than Leclerc. As Piastri's done a purple middle sector, might end up just about going quickest by the end of the lap as he comes through to the bus stop chicane. Not as good as the old bus stop chicane, but still good enough. And Piastri to the line. 2/10 down, but obviously easily good enough lap time to get him into Q2 with 4.5 minutes to go. But yeah, in terms of getting through to Q2, I think you're going to have to do a 1:41 point something. If you're on a 1:42.0 or slower, you're going to be either eliminated or at serious risk of being eliminated. So I think the top 9 of Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz, Lawson, Albon, Behrman, Hamilton, Verstappen, I think they'll be fine. I think everyone from Gasly in 10th down is in trouble. And that, of course, involves the 2 Mercedes cars who are currently in the drop zone. As we were just looking there at Antonelli, and now we're looking at Russell, who's just getting out of the way. Is he getting out of the way of a McLaren? No, he's just going through turn 10, which is Pouon. And now he does let through the McLaren. But yeah, Mercedes should be getting through to Q2 quite easily. They've just got to make sure they deliver clean laps. But Colapinto, who's still in the pit lane, you'd imagine he'll be eliminated, even if he comes out again. And Lance Stroll in the drop zone, no surprise about that. He's been eliminated in Q1 many times this season. As we are looking at Antonelli, who exits the bus stop and starts his final lap of Q1. And let's see if he can make it through. He got eliminated in SQ1 yesterday. Surely can make it through this time. As Antonelli DRS open. And now starts the run up to Lecom. And a good first sector for Antonelli. I won't call it great, but good enough. As Russell does a purple first sector, about a tenth quicker than Antonelli, just in the first sector alone. So Russell's right on it. As Antonelli flashes through turn 10 and 11. Now into the Fania chicane. And yeah, the Mercedes looking good. And this middle sector should be massively up on what Alonso's done previously. No, it's not. He's slightly slower. So, not a great lap from Antonelli. Russell going nearly 0.4 of a second quicker than Antonelli as they're both on their lap. So, Antonelli might struggle to get through here. Let's see as he comes through the final bus stop chicane to the line. And Antonelli does a 1:42.1. I'm not sure that's going to be good enough. I think Antonelli might be in big trouble here. As Russell goes 8th. Lance Stroll only 18th. He's out. No surprise about that. Here comes Alonso. He's out as well. Aston Martin, what a disaster. Both cars out in Q1. As here is Bortoleto passing, I think, Colapinto there, who's about to start his final lap right before the flag drops. Bortoleto up to 10th, and I think that might just be enough for Bortoleto to make Q2. As we are now looking at Oliver Behrman, who I think will make it through to Q2 anyway, as Sonoda is 10th. Behrman goes 5th. Brilliant from the young Brit, only 20 years old. Here's his teammate Esteban Ocon, though. Antonelli is in the drop zone, so Antonelli is out in Q1. What an awful performance from the young Italian. As Ocon goes 13th and pushes Pierre Gasly into the drop zone. Lewis Hamilton, though, now at big risk. As we've got Max Verstappen having improved, and he's up to 3rd. Isaac Hadjar up to 4th. As Gasly goes 11th, and Lewis Hamilton is now in the drop zone. And coming up to now the bus stop chicane. Can he drag this Ferrari through? Surely he can. To the line he comes, and yes, he does. He goes 7th. Lewis Hamilton is through, as here is Colapinto. Can he somehow get into Q2? No, he goes 17th, which pushes the two Aston Martins on the back row of the grid. What on earth have they done to that car? And Bortoleto ended up out as well. So there you go. Q1 over and done with, and Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. People were saying online that this was one of Antonelli's best circuits. And yeah, he is been awful this weekend. I'm not quite sure about that. But let's go through. As Q1 is over, your drivers that have made it through to Q2. Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Hadjar, Behrman, Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Lawson, Albon, Russell, Gasly, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, and Ocon. And knocked out in Q1, Gabriel Bortoleto, Franco Colapinto, Kimi Antonelli, Fernando Alonso, 19th, and Lance Stroll in 20th. And Q2 will be underway in a couple of minutes' time. With Aston Martin, I think Alonso definitely could have done better there, but Aston Martin, are slow. That's clear to see. Antonelli, though, awful performance. And, just nowhere near good enough. And to be honest, if you look at it, since the European season began at Imola, Antonelli has only scored points once, which was in Canada for his first podium. Now, that's not all down to his fault. Obviously, he had an engine issue. In Imola, Spain, Silverstone, obviously, he had some sort of issue. So, it's not all his fault, but still. He's only scored 15 points in the last, 6 races. That's nowhere near good enough. Rook's telling me Lewis Hamilton's had his time deleted. So has he actually been eliminated? Let me look. He has. Lewis Hamilton is out. Oh my, why couldn't the Sky broadcast have kept on for a bit longer? Because they cut away before we found that out. But Lewis Hamilton is out. He had his lap time deleted for a track limit violation at the Radio, I think it was. And Lewis Hamilton, 16th. As if Ferrari's weekend couldn't get any worse. Hamilton out in Q1 and he will start from 16th. Awful from him and Antonelli. And luckily for Bortoleto, he is through. So both Saubers through to Q2. But last year's race winner at this track is out in 16th place in Q1. What a disaster. But with a Ferrari and a Mercedes being out, this is now a big opportunity for those midfield teams like Haas, Racing Bulls, who looked very good, to possibly get themselves on the third row of the grid. So, this is a big opportunity. But let me just quickly get the second cut-off zone ready there. And of course, whoever is in the positions of 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th at the end of Q2 will be out of the session. And they're just examining where the lap time deletion came for Hamilton. It was at the top of Radio. Just slightly over the white line. And that's what's done it. Dom saying steep learning curve for Antonelli. Yeah, indeed. And from Hamilton's perspective, that was poor. He is better than that. And the worst bit about it is he didn't need to do it. It's, that was at a part of the track where you're flat out. It was, it's completely unnecessary. So, yeah, just not good enough from Hamilton, who is still in his car. Ferrari probably trying to somehow get that reversed, but that's not going to happen. Lewis Hamilton is out in Q1. As Q2 is underway, I'll get the timer on screen in about 30 seconds. But one thing from that session was, Racing Bulls looked very quick, Haas as well, and Williams. But McLaren already showing lots of pace straight out of the bag. So there you go. 14 minutes remain in Q2 as the two McLarens come out of the garage, followed by Russell. Oh no, Russell is ahead of the two McLarens. There's another load of cars coming out as well. As we're looking at Max Verstappen, who is joined by his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. So both Red Bulls in Q2. Will we have both Red Bulls in Q3? I don't think we will, but we'll see. You'd certainly hope so for Tsunoda's sake. But in this session, you'd probably be expecting the best times in this session to be a mid 1 minute 40, which would be around the pole position time of sprint qualifying yesterday. So to get through to Q3, you're going to have to do, at worst, probably a 141.3, 141.4, I'd say. But if you do a 1 minute 40 lap time, then I think definitely you will be going through to Q3. So let's see who can do what lap time and whether Max Verstappen can lay down maybe a marker for the McLarens later in this session. As we're looking at Verstappen here. Just coming through second stabilo on his outlap. And Verstappen, luckily, well, not I won't say luckily, because I don't really think he's got the car to fight for pole position. But if he was to take pole or at least finish first, then for the first time in 4 years he would actually start there, because the last 3 years he's finished first in qualifying but had grid penalties. As Verstappen starts his first lap of Q2, let's see if he can lay down any sort of marker. As Max through Eau Rouge and Radion. And now on the Kemmel Straight, where much of the overtaking is done here. A 30.1 for the first sector. That is not that great. As Ocon has gone quicker in the first sector than Verstappen. Obviously, Haas still running the very skinny wings. Now through Pouon. And on the run to the Fania chicane, the Red Bull looking good through there. And into now the Stavilo corners. And looked like a good middle sector from Verstappen, but let's see what the lap time is going to be at the end of it. As he comes through, Blanchimont passes a car on the inside and now brakes hard for the bus stop chicane. And that looked good from Max, who comes to the line and is a 140.9, which is good, but it's not. It's definitely not laying down a marker for pole. As Ocon does a 141.6. That's a pretty good first lap from him for Q2. As Tsunoda does a 141.2. That's a very good one for him. If Tsunoda is to make it through to Q3. As we're looking at the McLarens, Lando Norris has done a purple middle sector. As Russell has gone third. Here comes Piastri, who goes quickest by 0.3 of a second. Just very easy there for the McLaren, 140.6. Lando Norris goes second, 0.09 of a second slower. But yeah, McLaren still comfortably quicker than everybody else, which is no surprise. And then third and fourth, 2 Red Bulls. And then Russell, Albon, Ocon, Sainz. Actually, Sainz has been bested for 8th by Liam Lawson. As Charles Leclerc has completed the first 2 sectors. He's about 0.4 off the pace of Piastri. So this lap probably will put Leclerc in 4th place. As Gasly goes up to 9th. Leclerc exits the chicane. And yeah, goes 4th. About a 10.5 nearly. Slower than Verstappen. Can't ask any more from Leclerc there. As Hadjar goes 8th. Good lap. Very good lap from Isaac. As the 2 Saubers, 11th and 12th. As Behrman's still in the pits. Hasn't done a lap time. So 7.5 minutes to go. Here's a replay of why Behrman hasn't done a lap time. Coming down to Pouon. And turns in. And he ran slightly too wide on the exit curb. And caused the car to lose the rear. You have to get it just right on the exit there. And he just went a bit too far. That's the problem, though, with Haas. When you cut the downforce, it'll increase understeer and oversteer moments. But yeah, 7 minutes to go in Q2. And currently it's Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Tsunoda up in 5th. Tsunoda's done a great job so far in Q2. I think the lap time Tsunoda's done already is probably good enough to get him through to Q3. Obviously, we'll want to go out again and absolutely make sure. But yeah, I think Tsunoda will make Q3 here. Russell in 6th, and then Albon, Hadjar, Ocon, and Lawson. And then in the drop zone, Hulkenberg, Bortoletto, Gasly, Sainz, Behrman. Mercedes have not shown a lot of pace so far. Obviously, Antonelli knocked out in 18th. Russell currently 6th and 0.3 off the pace of Leclerc. And slower than Tsunoda. So you'd hope there's a bit more pace in the Mercedes there. But the team we're looking at on the broadcast, McLaren just there. Still looking very comfortable. I think McLaren, as long as both drivers deliver their best laps, I think McLaren are going to easily get the front row here. Before we go any further, though, make sure again, smash a like button. We're on 44 likes. Let's try and get up to 60 or 70 plus likes if we can by the end of qualifying. And make sure to join me tomorrow at 12 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race, for a build up to the race and then a watch along for tomorrow's Belgian Grand Prix. Make sure to be there for what could be a wet and maybe wild Belgian Grand Prix in the Ardennes Forest. Which has been coated in hot sunshine so far this weekend. Been one of the hotter weekends at Spa. as there is the TV helicopter going over the fans who are sat at turn 10. Great place, this track, to sit at many corners. This is a Grand Prix that I do want to go to at some point because it does seem, from a fan point of view, like a very fan-friendly track. And plus, it's not... it's one of the closer races to the UK. So, yeah, hopefully one day I'll be able to experience Spa at its best. As all the cars now coming out at once. But in terms of the lap times, I think the top 6, Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Tsunoda, Russell, I think they're fine. I think it's everyone from Albon in 7th down who needs to be concerned with improving. And we will see who delivers on these important final laps. Again, with already a Ferrari and Mercedes out in Q1, some important positions up for grabs that wouldn't have previously been up for grabs. Maybe a third row grid position for a Williams, Racing Bulls, or even Haas. As his replay, I think, just of an unsafe release, maybe, from the Racing Bulls on the McLaren. And yeah, just the usual bullshit. Nothing that anyone's going to get a penalty for, but yeah. Warnings and fines, that's all it results in. As we're looking at Pierre Gasly, who was unlucky earlier, had a car problem, couldn't really do the sprint. But he had a good sprint qualifying yesterday, ended up 8th, which was, I think, a really good performance from him. Remember, the Renault engine in the back of that car is the weakest of the 4 engines on the grid by, was it 20, 30 horsepower? And he was able to put it up in 8th place. So, and I think Gasly this season has, with many qualifying laps, shown that he is still one of the top few, or one of those top midfield level drivers. He is still very capable of delivering over a qualifying lap. But the team he races for still not helping him on race day. But I thought his performance at Silverstone in the wet was also very good, finishing in 6th. So yeah, Gasly, I think, deserves a bit of credit for the season he's had. It's not been, I wouldn't say it's been a great season necessarily from Gasly. He's had better years, but it's still, I think, considering the circumstances of the car and the team he races for, I think Gasly's doing absolutely well enough. As Gasly has completed Sector 1 on his final Q2 lap. Can he make it through to the final part of qualifying? Into the Fanish chicane. Alpine looks pretty good through there. Everyone improving, though, in the first sector. Gasly, he's a 10th up on Lawson, but I don't think this lap's going to be enough to get him through to Q3. As Hadjar doing a very good lap. Only half a second off Piastri after the first 2 sectors. So Hadjar is going to improve a lot on this final lap. But Gasly might just get into the top 10 briefly, but I don't think he will end up in it at the end of the day. As he comes across the line, goes 9th. But again, I'm not sure he's going to stay there. As here comes Isaac Hadjar, who goes 6th. Brilliant lap. Hulkenberg stays 11th. Bortoleto goes 7th. What a lap by Bortoleto. That is an incredible lap out of nowhere. Once again, proving his prowess over a single lap, especially compared to his teammate. Can he stay there? I think he probably will. As Russell, out of the final chicane, not improved his middle sector, goes 6th. That will get Russell through, but Mercedes do not look very quick. Carlos Sainz stays 14th. That is an awful lap by Carlos. Lawson up to 8th. Brilliant lap from Lawson. Both Racing Bulls are going to make Q3 by the looks of it, as Gasly pushed into 11th. The only cars that can do anything about their position are the two Haas's. Both in the drop zone. Behrman has done a very good lap so far. This is going to be so close, as Albon is not improved and stays in 10th. I think Albon is probably going to get eliminated here, as Ocon through the final chicane to the line. No, Ocon stays in 11th. Here comes Behrman, though. Can he somehow make the top 10? No, he can't. 11th and 12th for the two Haas's. I thought they were going to make it, but they just didn't have the pace in the final sector. And somehow, Albon, despite not improving his final lap, has made it through. Brilliant stuff from him, and brilliant from Bortoleto, making Q3 for the second time in the last 3 races. And brilliant from Lawson and Hadjar as well. Both Racing Bulls through. Brilliant job by them, as this might be why Behrman didn't make it through. And yeah, very scruffy turn 1, and that's what cost him. Behrman would have been in Q3 if he had not had that bad turn 1. That's a shame. But the paces in that Haas car, they will be a factor tomorrow. But let's go through who has made it through to the top 10 shootout. Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Yuki Tsunoda, George Russell, Isaac Hadjar, Liam Lawson, Gabriel Bortoleto, Alex Albon, and knocked out in Q2, Esteban Ocon, Oliver Behrman, Pierre Gasly, Nico Hülkenberg, and Carlos Sainz. In terms of who was eliminated there, I think Hülkenberg definitely could have done better. Carlos Sainz, though, what a horrible performance that is. Especially after what he did yesterday. 6th in sprint qualifying, and now 15th in actual qualifying, and Albon has made it through to Q3. That is just, that sums up Carlos's season, where he shows potential, but then when it actually comes to delivering it, most of the time he flops. Nowhere near good enough, I'm afraid, from Sainz. Good job from Tsunoda to finally get his car into Q3. Red Bull looked like they could get a pretty strong overall position here, because Mercedes are still not looking very quick. But yeah, Racing Bulls, very important result for them, 7th and 8th. So far, at least, getting into Q3, if they can set themselves up for the race, get a good grid position, get a load of points tomorrow, that could really help them in the championship. Racing Bulls are 25 points behind Williams, I think they are, in the championship, so not over that fight for 5th. Astra saying expected Haas to do better here. Considering their setup, yeah, I thought they would get through with at least one car there. But yeah, both drivers just not delivering quite enough. And by the way, if anyone's wondering why Lewis Hamilton is out, it's because his lap time was deleted for a track limit violation. Yes, he did go P7 in Q1, but then a minute or so later, his lap time was deleted. as they're just showing a replay here of Behrman. Before he started his lap, he had to get out of the way for a Red Bull and then start his lap. Maybe, yeah, had a bit colder tyres than ideally he wanted to, but still, he shouldn't have made that mistake. But Behrman can still score points tomorrow, so not the end of the world. But in terms of Q3, it looks like McLaren are going to lock out the front row, and then it's probably going to be Max third, and then either Leclerc, Tsunoda, Russell, 4th, 5th, 6th, and then you'll have Hadjar, Lawson, Bortoleto, and Albon in whatever positions after that. I wish it would be a proper fight for pole between, different teams, but looks like it's between Piastri and Norris in Q3. McLaren, again, just way too quick compared to the rest of the field, and that's why we have this situation. I do wonder, though, can anyone, well, that anyone is going to be the Piastri or Norris, can any of those two McLaren drivers get into the 1 minute 39s? That's going to be very interesting. But a low 1 minute 40, if you can do a low 1 minute 40, that will put you right in the fight for pole position. But a late 1:39, I think, guarantees you pole position. I think if you can do a late 39, then I just don't see how that could be beaten. But who knows? As Behrman looks quite angry and storms off towards the weighbridge to be weighed. As Q3 is about to begin. I will finish up the poll in the chat, by the way, asking you guys who will take pole position. We'll go through the results of that in a moment. I just want to make sure I get the timer synced up on screen. So the red light is still on at the exit of the pit lane. As Sky F1 are just showing an interview with Lewis Hamilton, who looks absolutely dejected at ending up where he has. And it's a shame he made that mistake, because Ferrari at the minute look quicker than Mercedes, and Hamilton probably could have ended up today with a top 5, which would put him kind of in the mix for a podium. So, yeah, he's cost himself dearly as Hamilton. As Q3 is underway, and the first car on track is George Russell, who, of course, famously was on the front row here in a Williams, but since then he has not managed to equal that result, funnily enough, in a better car. But yeah, I'll get the timer synced up on screen in about 20 seconds, and then we'll go through the poll results. Cheers for voting in the poll if you have, as Oscar Piastri joins the circuit. Piastri's been mostly this weekend the man on top. Will he keep that up in this crucial Q3 session? There you go, 11 minutes to go in qualifying. But let's go through these results. 639 votes. And I asked you guys who will take pole position for the Belgian Grand Prix. And 41% of you have gone for Max Verstappen. If he gets pole, I'd be amazed. But that's what you guys have said. 35% of you have gone for Piastri, 18% for Norris, and 4% for George Russell. Let's see if Max can somehow get pole. I don't think he can. But he has surprised us already this season. Look at Silverstone. Look at Suzuka. As we're looking at Charles Leclerc here, who's had a bit of an erratic qualifying this year. He's had a couple sessions where he was really strong, but he's had some sessions where he's not quite delivered last Grand Prix at Silverstone being one of those. As Ferrari searching for their first proper pole position of the year. As Max Verstappen, the world champion, starts his first possible pole position attempt. Again, if he's going to get pole, he needs to do a low 1 minute 40. If he can't do that, then he's not getting pole unless the McLaren drivers really mess it up. As Verstappen opens the DRS down the Kemmel Straight. And the first sector is, I wouldn't say that great, but it's the rest of the lap that matters, really. As the McLarens have started their lap. As Verstappen has gone through the Jackie X corner now into P1. As Piastri has completed the first sector and has gone slightly quicker than Verstappen. As Max through the Fagnes chicane, now into the first Stavilo. And yeah, this is not pole position level pace whatsoever from Max. As he comes through Blanchimont, which obviously is flat out, up to the bus stop chicane. And Verstappen, really on this lap, has looked absolutely fine, but the lap time is not going to be good enough. No, 1:41.0. That is, I think, slower than what he did in Q2. So that was definitely not a good enough lap. As here come the McLarens. Lando Norris has done a purple middle sector. Can he end the lap, though, quicker than his teammate Piastri in the fight for pole? As Tsunoda goes fourth. Leclerc now second. Piastri quickest on a 1:40.7. That's not as quick as what he did in Q2. Lando Norris a couple tenths quicker. A 1:40.562. So McLaren front row for now in Norris's favour. McLaren, though, there is a lot more pace in those McLarens. A lot more pace. As it's Verstappen third, Leclerc fourth, and then Russell, Tsunoda, Lawson, Hadjar, Bortoletto. What's Albon going to do? Albon goes eighth. As Max says, really weird, just didn't have the same grip. It really, in that, or over that first lap, not many cars went quicker than what they did in Q2. Lando Norris went quicker than what he did in Q2, but only by, I think, a couple tenths of a second. Piastri was a tenth slower. Max was a tenth slower. So those laps were not the best that these cars can do whatsoever. And like I said, there is a lot more pace, definitely in the McLarens. And the fight for pole ain't over yet. But it is. With one run to go, Lando Norris on provisional pole by almost 2/10 of a second over Piastri. And then Verstappen third, half a second away. Leclerc fourth, Russell fifth, Tsunoda sixth, Lawson seventh, Albon eighth, Hadjar ninth, Bortoletto in 10th. Lawson, if he can hang on to 7th, that'd be great for him. He really needs those type of results to keep his seat at Racing Bulls. Meanwhile, Yuki Tsunoda in 6th is currently heading for the best qualifying result he's had since the first Grand Prix in Melbourne, where he qualified 5th for Racing Bulls. The Australian Grand Prix feels a long time ago. But that's how bad of a season it's been for Tsunoda. as Bortoletto, we've just been notified, has had his lap time deleted for a track limit violation on the exit of turn 10, which is the exit of Pouhon. And yeah, replay clearly showing that he went all four wheels over the white line. So yeah, he was 10th anyway, so it doesn't matter. But at least Bortoletto has one final crack at maybe grabbing a better position. And yeah, even Russell saying, did everyone go slower that run? And Mercedes saying that, yeah, it looks like quite a bit slower than expected. And that Verstappen complained of low grip. But there is one final run to correct that. But in terms of the fight for pole, it is between the two McLarens. Who will start on pole for our Belgian Grand Prix? A pole position that, I'll be honest, is not really that important because of the run at the start up Eau Rouge and on the Camel Straight. Pole position is not necessarily where you want to be for this Grand Prix. And if you look at the last few years, pole position has not been very successful. The last time pole position won this Grand Prix technically was Max in 2021, but that race never happened. So you'd have to go back to 2020, where Lewis Hamilton won for Mercedes. The last 3 years, we've had Ferrari start on pole, but Ferrari have not been able to take the win in any of those races. And in, I think, a couple of those, they weren't even leading at the end of the first lap. So, again, pole position, not necessarily the best place to be for the start of a Belgian Grand Prix. But still, pole is what the drivers want. But it's not the end of the world, is the point I'm trying to make, if you don't get pole here. As we're now looking at Max Verstappen, who I think he'll be satisfied with third. There's nothing he can do about the McLarens. And maybe if he has a really good run on the first lap tomorrow, can make up positions like he did in the sprint. Anyway, here is Max Verstappen's final lap. What can he do? Can he secure third on the grid? As, losing the rear-ender treat out of La Source. That would not have helped his cause. As Lando Norris starts his final lap, can he secure the pole he currently sits in? As Verstappen, yeah, not improved the first sector because of that moment at La Source. As Verstappen now down into turn 8. Norris is on the Camel Straight. Piastri has now started his lap. So is Leclerc and Russell, Hadjar and Bortoletto as well. Norris has not improved his first sector. Leclerc, though, has done a purple first sector. As Verstappen through the Fania chicane, pushing as hard as he can to get as much as he can out of that Red Bull. And Max 4/10 off Norris after the first two sectors. It's going to be close in the fight for third. But what we're looking at really is the fight for pole. Lando Norris, purple middle sector, but still overall slower than what he's done so far. We're not seeing what Oscar Piastri has done so far on this lap. As Leclerc doing a good lap. As Max stays third. Leclerc, though, as it stands, on a better lap. So Leclerc might go up to third here. As Isaac Hadjar goes fourth. Where did that come from? As Lando Norris doesn't improve. Does that give the key advantage to his teammate? We'll see. Here comes Leclerc, who does go third by 0.003 of a second. What a lap from Leclerc in a horrible Ferrari car. He somehow dragged it to third. Here's Piastri. No, Piastri doesn't take pole. He misses out. He improved by 1/10, but that wasn't enough. Here comes Russell, who did a purple first and final sector, but still only 5th on the grid. As Hadjar now drops to 6th, Lawson up to 7th. We've still got Tsunoda and Albon out there who haven't finished their laps. Tsunoda up to 6th. Only a couple positions behind his teammate. As Albon goes 5th. What a lap by Alex Albon. He has just about got ahead of the Mercedes of Russell, and Albon, who is continuing his amazing season, is 5th and on the 3rd row for Williams. What a lap by Albon. And yeah, that moment they're just showing a replay of for Max at the end, or the exit of turn 1. That's what probably did cost him 3rd on the grid. But there you go. That is qualifying done for the Belgian Grand Prix. And let's go through what your starting grid will be for tomorrow's race at Spa. Lando Norris on pole. Oscar Piastri 2nd. Charles Leclerc 3rd. Max Verstappen 4th. Alex Albon 5th for Williams. What a drive from Albon. Quite possibly the drive of the day. We'll see you guys vote on that in a moment. Russell 6th. Tsunoda 7th. Hadjar 8th. Lawson 9th. Bortoletto 10th. And then Ocon 11th. Behrman, Gasly, Hulkenberg, Sainz, Hamilton 16th. Colapinto 17th. Antonelli 18th. And then 19th and 20th. Alonso and Stroll for Aston Martin. But there you go. Qualifying over. Let's go through before we head off. Who is your driver of the day for qualifying at Spa? For me, driver of the day has to be Alexander Albon. That was a special lap. But your options for driver of the day will be Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Alexander Albon, and I'll put Bortoletto there as well. I thought he did great to get through to Q3. But for me, Albon, driver of the day. What a lap. 5th on the grid. And yeah, weird that George Russell, 6th, even though he did the quickest first and final sector, he ended up 6th on the grid and nearly 7/10 off pole. So clearly in the middle sector, that Mercedes is absolutely awful. Locus saying you said Ferrari would be fighting for the 3rd row. I did, but I was wrong. Thankfully, I was wrong. But even though it seems like Ferrari have improved on where they were earlier today and yesterday, they are still comfortably miles off McLaren. And congratulations to Lando Norris and McLaren for pole. First pole at Spa for McLaren in 13 years. And that is McLaren's first front row lockout at Spa since I was going to say 2000 and something, but no. That's their first front row lockout at Spa in the 21st century. But it's their first front row lockout at Spa since 1999. Back in the Hakkinen and Coulthard days. and I think it was Hakkinen on pole that weekend, and then Coulthard, I think, won the race. I was only 1.5 years old. That's how long ago it's been since McLaren locked out the front row. Nib saying if only Max fucked out of La Source in the sprint like that. Yeah. But in terms of tomorrow's race, if the start of the race is dry, then for Lando Norris, even though he's got pole today, he could end up possibly second or even third by the time we're midway through the first lap tomorrow. So we will have to see how things play out tomorrow in terms of the weather and the start of the race. One thing is for sure, dry or wet, McLaren are going to win. There is no doubt about that. Unless the two cars crash into each other, they are going to win tomorrow's race. In terms of how dominant the wind will be, it depends on the conditions. If it's wet, they are going to win the race by at least half a minute, if not more, maybe 45 seconds or more. If it's dry, I think McLaren will probably win by what? 20 seconds or so, probably. So, yeah. McLaren, I'm pretty certain, have got the win secured. In terms of who wins, though, of course, very important for the championship because Oscar Piastri, who is second on the grid for tomorrow, is 9 points clear of Lando Norris, who is on pole. So if Lando can win and Oscar finishes second, the gap will be 2 points in Piastri's favour going into the final race before the summer break in Hungary, which is next weekend. But if Piastri can win and Lando finishes second, then the gap goes up to 16 points. See how big of a swing that can be. People talking about Lewis's brakes. Got nothing to do with why he ended up 16th today. That was yesterday. Locus saying Leclerc is winning. I think Leclerc, in the dry, I think Leclerc can finish on the podium. I'm not saying he will. I think it's possible, but I still think that Max is the most likely to end up on the podium because I think the Red Bull car is better. Let's remember, Leclerc got third, and that was a great drive from Leclerc, but Max made a mistake which allowed Leclerc to get third. If Max had done his best lap there, Max would have ended up third. So let's remember that. Let me find a couple other comments here if I can. Albon driver of the day for me too, says Astro. Sarah Garrett says Albon or Leclerc. Dane says has to be Albon. Well, at the minute, it's none of those drivers winning the driver of the day vote. But John Boyce saying Ferrari finished. Jasmine saying, sorry, brakes had nothing to do with why he got into 16th. Apparently, the principle was on him for going lighter on the brakes. He ended up 16th in qualifying today because he had a lap time deletion because he ran over the white line. It's got nothing to do with the brakes. You're talking about yesterday. in terms of what happened with him, locking the Riz up. In terms of today, why he ended up 16th, it's because he did a track limit violation, which is a big shame for him because, again, as I said earlier, he really would have probably ended up 5th on the grid for this race if he had not done that, which would have set him up to maybe have a chance of a podium tomorrow. But he's cost himself, and he has only himself to blame. Todd saying both Red Bulls and both V-Carbs in the top 10. Sweet. Yeah, that's the first time. I think, is it first time all season we've had that? Both Red Bulls and both Racing Bulls in the top 10. The good race tomorrow for the Constructors' Championship for Red Bull. If Max can get on the podium and Tsunoda can finish, say, 6th or better. Because that's what Red Bull have needed all season. So, yeah, good to see Tsunoda actually performing for once. Dane asking, where do you think Hamilton will finish tomorrow? If it's dry, I think he'll probably finish, I don't know, 7th or 8th. In the wet, though, I think probably a bit lower purely because the Ferrari car is just not good whatsoever in wet conditions, and I think the last Grand Prix at Silverstone and the first Grand Prix in Melbourne proved that. Anyway, let's finish up this poll in the chat where I asked you guys who is driver of the day for qualifying at Spa. 63 votes, and 44% of you have gone for Lando Norris as driver of the day. 28% for Leclerc, 20% for Albon, and 6% for Bottas. I'm surprised by that. I thought Albon was going to win that hands down, but there you go. Yeah. Great performance from Norris. An important one, but getting pole must be converted into a race win. That was obviously Lando's trouble last year when it came to the Drivers' Championship battle. If he can deliver the race win tomorrow, it will be a crucial win in his championship bid. He absolutely, Norris, needs to win more tomorrow than Piastri does. Obviously, if Oscar wins, it's an important win, a great win. Obviously, who doesn't want to win at Spa, but Lando definitely needs to win more. Not just because he's behind in the championship, but also because he has had confidence issues this season. And to avoid them coming back, he needs to keep on form. Of course, he's won the last 2 races. Can he make it 3 in a row in 2025? We will find out. But guys, until tomorrow's race watch-along, cheers for coming along today. Obviously, I know there's not been any content on the channel for, 2 or 3 weeks, but thanks for coming along. And make sure to join me tomorrow, 2 hours before lights out at 12 p.m. UK time, for the build-up to the race, and then the race watch-along. I will be joined by co-commentator Niblo for the watch-along to obviously cover the race. And let's hope it's a good one, dry or wet. But yeah, make sure to join us for that tomorrow. And then, of course, the day after the race, if you can't join us for the race watch-along, there will be a podcast on Monday covering the events of the Belgian Grand Prix. So make sure to check out those bits of content as well. But guys, cheers for today. And until tomorrow's Belgian Grand Prix, make sure to join us again live at 12 p.m. UK time. Until then, and what could be a possibly wet and wild race or another decent race at Spa, we'll see. Until then, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.